The Life and Works of Paul Broca. In this presentation, we will discuss Paul Broca's personal life, academics, medical contributions, research regarding speech and language, anthropology, lobes, and his impact today. So who is Paul Broca? Paul Pierre Broca was one of the most influential figures in the history of psychology and anthropology. He is well known for his research regarding aphasia, specifically in what we now know to be Broca's aphasia. Paul Broca was an accomplished psychologist and anthropologist who lived from 1824 to 1880. His contributions to the medical community and research in the fields of speech, language, and anthropology are still highly regarded today. His personal life. Paul Broca was born in 1824 on June 28th in Sainte-Foy-la-Grande in France, which is pictured to the right. He passed in 1880. Although he was only alive for 46 years, Broca was known to be one of the greatest thinkers of his time and is still highly regarded to this day. Although not much is known about his personal life, we do know a few things. Starting out, Paul Broca was married to Augustine. Broca and Augustine had two sons, both of which went on to follow in their father's footsteps, with August becoming a professor in pediatric surgery and Andre becoming a professor in medical physics. Shortly before Broca passed away, he was elected as senator. While serving in Senate, Broca suffered a brain aneurysm and ultimately died from that. Paul Broca's parents were very intelligent individuals. His father, Benjamin Broca, was a surgeon and medical practitioner. His mother, whose name is unknown, was the daughter of a preacher. They enrolled Broca in school in their hometown, where he graduated at age 16. Broca's academic career is very, very impressive. His first official schooling came in his hometown, followed by medical school in Paris at age 17. Since the beginning of his life, Broca was always an advanced student, graduating early from both his primary and secondary institute. After graduating from his secondary institute, his next venture in the academic world was an internship in urology and dermatology. He was one of the youngest students at his medical school, which made it even more impressive. Broca's medical training led him to take those internships, and after completing his internships, he began working as an assistant to one of the surgeons. At this time, Broca was around 22 years old and more advanced in his academic training than most his age. By 1848, Broca took on one of the first huge roles of his career as prosecutor of anatomy. This is a position that we now know as being more like a professor, and he was only 24 years old. He was the youngest person to be appointed that position up until that point. Broca was a lifetime student and dedicated himself to learning, working as a professor starting in 1953. His work was as a professor in both medicine and anthropology, which made it possible for him to pursue both of his main interests. After a lifetime career as a student, involving both the field of psychology and anthropology, Broca was appointed as a lifetime member of the French Senate. Throughout his life, Broca accomplished a multitude of things, with his most important contribution being the discovery of Broca's area in the brain and Broca's aphasia, which impacts the ability for a person to produce speech. Broca's first theories on Broca's area and Broca's aphasia came from his patient, Monsieur Le Borgne. Le Borgne suffered from epilepsy and eventually lost his ability to speak and could only communicate using gestures and the single word tan. After Le Borgne died on April 17th, 1861, Broca investigated his autopsy and then showed his findings to others in the Anthropological Society. Broca's findings concluded that Leborn's loss of speech was from the disturbance in the third left frontal portion of his brain due to his epilepsy. Another patient, Monsieur Lelong, also posed similar findings, and Broca was able to find a lesion in the second and third frontal portion of Lelong's brain, which reinforced his earlier theories. So Broca's most important and most well-known contributions to the field of psychology are his discoveries on the topics of speech localization. Broca's aphasia is a term that many people have heard at least once in their life, but the story of how it came to be discovered is not so well known. During the 19th century, Franz Joseph Gall brought up the topic of speech localization within the brain. Up until this point, there was not much known about how the brain worked to form speech. This new topic ignited an interest with Broca, who was then presented with the opportunity to study the patient we just discussed, Monsieur Leborn. As we already know, Leborn suffered from epilepsy and eventually, due to his condition, suffered speech loss and was only able to use the word teen to describe his wants and needs to others, alongside the gestures he could make with the rest of his body. Leborn, who also eventually became known as Tan, entered Broca's care in 1861 due to surgery to treat his cellulitis. Only 6 days after his surgery, Leborn passed away. After performing his autopsy, Broca went before the Anthropological Society of Paris to give his own theory on the topic of speech localization. Broca cited Leborn's autopsy and stated that he believed that the reason Leborn suffered from speech loss was due to a softening of the left frontal convolution of the brain. Broca also took a special interest in language, in the study of language. Although he did not know much about the field, he did have an in-depth knowledge of the inner workings of language, and he did have some theories on language as a whole. Broca asserted that there were three levels of language, with the highest being where ideas are developed, the second level being the verbal forms of language, and the third being where the nerves to produce language are located. These three language levels were all equally important. However, the first two are what Broca considered to be intellectual levels of language, and what he referred to as a higher level. Broca considered these two to be higher levels because they are specific to humans, whereas animals do not have a way to develop language and speak it. Although animals do not inherently speak as humans do, Broca believed that they had their own types of languages that we cannot understand. Anthropology. While being one of the leading psychologists of his time, Paul Broca was also heavily interested in the study of anthropology and is regarded as a pioneer in the field. Broca's main area of study in anthropology was on the skulls and bones of primates. Broca was very heavily influenced by colleagues when it came to his findings in anthropology, excluding one thought, which he adamantly refused to agree on, which was that Caucasians were the superior race. Broca did not believe that there was a superior race, and he believed that all races were equal. Broca was also one of the first scientists to take part in the topic of the first Neanderthal man who was found in 1856. Many of these scientists surrounding this finding believed that the man was deformed, whereas Broca and many of his other peers shared the belief that the man was one of the first humans on Earth. One of the other main points in his anthropology career was when Broca was able to study a Peruvian skull. This was an important time for Broca, as well as others in the field, as the Peruvian skull showed signs of a type of surgery being performed. Before this, no one had considered that surgeries were being conducted that early on. Broca is still very highly regarded in the field of anthropology and published over 200 papers on the topic and many subtopics in the field. Yet another interest of Broca's was the lobe found in a mammal's cerebrum, Broca took the existing research which described the major lobes and took it a step further by investigating a wide range of mammals. His investigative research first led him to look at the otter brain, in which he established what he thought would be a familiar formation. After establishing otters as his familiar formation, he then went on to research osmotic mammals, followed by aquatic mammals, which eventually led him to his final goal of the primate brain. The primate brain led him to the conclusion that all parts of the primate brain have analogous parts, which was a very hot topic at that time in the world of neuroscience. This theory was one that was dispelled by many of his fellow scholars, but it was one of the theories that Broca stood by adamantly. Broca's findings also led him to the conclusion that all mammals have the great limbic lobe. The size, shape, and overall context of the great limbic lobe varied between species, but the greatest variation was in the primate brain as it seemed to be dominated by the frontal lobes. Broca's impact today is an important one. He was one of the most influential thinkers of his time, and his work remains very relevant today. Broca researched and coined the term Broca's aphasia, which is still used vastly in medical terminology today. Broca's aphasia is a type of speech impediment that happens when Broca's area in the brain is damaged. Broca's impact can also be found in cancer research, as he was one of the first in his field to do in-depth research on a family to see how cancer occurrences were linked. His work in cancer research has led to many other significant findings in the field and helped to prolong cancer research throughout the world for generations to come. He is also notable for his creation of the Anthropology Society of Paris, which is the oldest and most prominent anthropological society in the world. The society helped to create new research topics regarding the field of anthropology, which was one of Broca's main areas of study outside the world of healthcare. Thank you for your time, and I hope you found this presentation to be informational.